Today we are exploring the rich overlap between Eastern Buddhism and Western Stoicism, but also where the paths diverge. Join us as we explore this topic with Dr. Ranjini George. The Via Stoica Podcast with Brendan and Benny. Powered by viastoica.com, your home for coaching, workshops, quotes, and Stoic content that inspires. Welcome to the Via Stoica Podcast. My name is Benny, and I'm joined here by my friend and co-host Brendan. Brendan, how are you doing today?
Well, Benny, I am doing fantastic today. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited about this episode today. We've got a wonderful guest. Should we just dive right in?
Yes, please.
Good. So I wanted to welcome Dr. Ranjini George. Doctor, how are you doing?
Doing great. The weather has cooled down. We had a bit of a heat wave, but it's great now. So
nice. And where are you again?
I'm near Toronto.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, the heat wave, that can be tricky, right? And then the temperatures are a little bit extremer now these days, no?
Yes, but it's ironical because when I lived in Dubai and I visited Canada in the summer, I would think, and people said, oh, it's hot. And I thought, this is not hot. But I think your body just adjusts. And then when it was winter, after I immigrated to Canada, when it was fall, it felt like winter and I was wearing these heavy winter coats in fall. My first winter in Canada, and then I would find the heat absolutely nothing here. So, but then it changed.
Yeah, I can relate. I lived for Dubai, in Dubai for 5 years. And the thing is there, it's all adjusted to the heat. For example, I'm from the Netherlands. If we get like 30 degrees Celsius, it's very difficult to escape from it because we don't have air conditioning. We don't have all the amenities to deal with it. So it's a very different experience.
It's a different experience. And you don't feel you can escape the heat, as you said. Like when my children were small, even the play areas, the sand play, everything was indoors.
But I did feel like, and this is a strange feeling, just kind of after I think the second year in Dubai, when the summer arrived, I had this winter feeling in the Netherlands because then everything goes indoor. Right, you start to do things more indoor. It's the outside world starts to become a little bit scary, if you will, and so that's the same feeling that I had in Dubai. It looked nice outside, but you can't really go out and walk. 50 degrees Celsius. I don't even know what that is in Fahrenheit, like 120 or something.
That's something. Yeah.
It's really, really hot, like Death Valley hot. Is that the temperature there in the US, and it's a really strange experience, right? We can talk about that a little bit. I just wanted to kind of introduce you a little bit more before we started to continue with the conversation. So if I got it correct, and you can, obviously correct me if you will, you're a professor at the Toronto University with a master's in creative writing and a PhD in English. And you wrote a book, and I wanted to start there as well with your questions about Through My Mother's Window, right? The lies of Emirati women, if I have it correctly. And I wanted to ask you that because I worked in a boys' school and I lived in Dubai for a while, and I taught the Emirati boys. My principle, and there's a lot of misconceptions about that world, right? There's a lot of like, it's ruled by the men. But my experience was like, my principals and all the academic staff are all women. And whenever I went to like an office somewhere, I prefer to be helped by a woman because of, they have so much more drive to learn and to study and to develop themselves, which is a shame for the boys, I think. I wanted to push them a lot more to study. But when I heard stories about people who were working in girls' schools, right, because they're separate, they told me that they are so much more academically driven because it's a way for them to get out of the house and to make something for themselves. While the boys, my students told me, teacher, I don't need to study much. I go to the police office and to the police and to the military, and I make good money, and that's it. So I wanted to kind of start there because I thought that was a fascinating book. What made you write that book? And can you tell us a little bit more about like the women in Dubai and the Emirati women?
So, to backtrack, after I finished my PhD in the US, I moved first to Oman, and I was teaching at Sultan Qaboos University, which is again a very beautiful university in Muscat, Oman, for about 5.5 years. And then I moved to Dubai in 1998, and I was part of the founding faculty of Zayed University. And so it was an Emirati women university when it started. And the women in my classes I taught at Zayed University for about 13.5 years. And the women who were in my class were the first generation of women to go to university. And so as I, absolutely, wonderful students to teach. And so as I taught there, I had this idea of actually collecting their stories, collecting their grandmother's stories, their mother's stories. And for many of their mothers and grandmothers, the world was really the kitchen. And Dubai is a city that's transformed so rapidly. Like, so the grandmothers had stories about the pearl divers and the old Dubai, so the new Dubai, which is like Hong Kong or New York with its skyscrapers and flamboyant malls and incredible restaurants. At that time, about 82% of the population was expatriates. So it's a very fascinating city in itself. And in a memoir that I'm working on, it's almost a character, the landscape of Dubai. So their stories were really fascinating. And then I submitted a proposal to the university to write a book that would collect the stories of their mothers and their grandmothers and even some of the recipes. So I got a Zayed University research grant. So I was very grateful for that. And we have the book, which is on my shelf. I can bring it in a little bit later on.
That sounds amazing. And I can't even imagine how much the city changed. I was there in January after having left 2.5 years, and it already changed a lot. You can just go on Zayed Road and you see all these differences. And so I can't even imagine how much it changed from when you went there, and even going back to from like when the grandmothers of your students lived there, right? From being the pearl divers and then suddenly finding oil and seeing this booming the city jumping out of the street because
Absolutely. So in 1998, like the high rise that I first lived in was one of the few high rises on Sheikh Zayed Road. But in some years, there were so many.
Yeah.
Each, like later on, of course, the Emirates Tower, the Burj Dubai, just so much. Atlantis.
Yeah. There's now a second Atlantis already, so they're just... That's great. And obviously, we're not here to talk about Dubai, but I love that story. And I'm definitely going to look into your book because having been there and having experienced it, it sounds wonderful. To capture those stories sounds like a fascinating idea and a fascinating thing to read. But we're also here to talk about philosophy, right? And maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about your background, and then we can kind of work our way into your philosophical story as well.
Yeah. So my degree is I did my MA in English Lit at St. Stephen's in New Delhi. So I actually grew up in both Kenya and in New Delhi, but born in Calcutta, India. And then went for my PhD to the US and then moved to the Middle East to study. So I've always been, my primary specialization was in English literature. And so I taught in English departments, both in Oman and the Emirates. And then I got really interested in creative writing. I used to write when I was younger and started attending writing workshops in North America during the summer holidays. And then later on, after I immigrated to the Canada, got MFA in creative writing. So I now teach both, classes that focus both on creative writing and in literature. And then side by side, I was also training as a meditation instructor, in the 30s. I think one of the most pressing things, like in English literature, Ivan Ilyich, he in the short story, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, he says, at the time when he's dying, he said, is my life half lived? That questioning of how he spent his life. So this pressing need to just not waste my human life, which is finite. None of us know when we'll die, how we'll die. So this sense of groundlessness, right, in life, and just this pressing desire not to waste my life, to live a meaningful life for me, a meaningful life that is of benefit to me, benefit to others, a good life, and how to work with the difficult emotions. We all have our neurosis, our patterns, our shadows. So how to manage, fear, anxiety, sometimes a sense of hopelessness, which we feel sometimes even in, like in the world today, like events. How do we manage our emotions? And so this, and what is meaningful work? Like, how can I do meaningful work? So this sort of pressing desire just not to waste my life, like not to waste my life was really something that, as I think in the 30s, in my 30s, when I was in Dubai and I was starting to, I started reading the Dalai Lama's Art of Happiness and trying to figure that all out. So that sort of got me into meditation. It got me into studying both from the Hindu Vedic tradition, from the Buddhist tradition, Sikh tradition, Rumi, the poets, Sufism, but really just trying to understand, my own mind and trying to live a meaningful life and also do meaningful work. Just as Marcus Aurelius says, what is not good for the hive is not good for the bee. So I was introduced to Marcus and to philosophy through literature, and the classes that I took, Marcus's Meditations is a literary classic. So I can't say I read the whole thing. You read so much, so you read a little bit, but I didn't really know the philosophy of Stoicism really until I came across Donald Robertson's How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. And when I read How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, I saw the book, pre-ordered it before it came out, and then read it really fast. And I've read it many times. But I was struck then because by then I had really immersed myself in a lot of Buddhism. And Buddhism really is a philosophy. It's a way of training one's mind. And I found that the resonance, that was what drew me to Stoicism. Like, I'd studied existentialism and other philosophies, but the resonance between Stoicism, how do you train your mind? How do you work with anger? How do you work with chronic pain, or how do you, work with anxiety? How do you work with the fact of death and impermanence of all things? So that was, how do you live a good life? Be a good woman now. As Marcus says, be a good man now. Don't talk about being one. So that really got me into Stoicism. And then I started really reading and rereading the Meditations. So I read Epictetus, I read Seneca, I read the others, but Marcus Aurelius and the Meditations, which is so poetic, so beautifully written, is so much, is always on my desk, different versions, different copies by my bedside.
Yeah, no, that's great. And thank you for sharing that story and that journey with us. And I have my question for you is, so it's as you've studied, through literature, you've studied these kind of Eastern practices as well, and then you're now introduced to Stoicism through Donald Robertson and his book How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. What stood out to you though as kind of the things of why these two, Buddhism and Stoicism, combining them or working with both of them together can be so powerful?
Yeah, for me, it's very complementary. So I feel that the philosophies have, every philosophy, like every religion, has a different emphasis, and so for example, in Bhakti Yoga or in Hinduism, there's devotional chant, there's repetition, way of quietening your mind. And in Christianity, there's a lot of focus on prayer and other things. Buddhism is so much about the Buddha is not God. And he doesn't, you can have an image of the Buddha, and if you bow to it, you're reminded that the person you're bowing to and yourself is empty. So that the Buddha is just a man. And so that same nature, like Marcus Aurelius is just a man, that same nature that exists in the Buddha exists in you. Or if you look at the female Buddha, Tara, Canon, Kuan Yin, that same quality of compassion and wisdom that exists in them, that capacity exists in you. So part of the practice is just sort of awakening that nature, whatever you want to call that nature. Now, as Marcus Aurelius says in the meditation, philosophy and only philosophy can keep your guardian spirit intact. So there's this idea that there is that higher, that is that thing in you, but how do you protect it? The sun in your heart, or that compassionate, more wise part of yourself. So I found that both philosophies, as I study them, both teach me how to train my mind. Both philosophies, to me, are completely aligned in the way they emphasize that the most precious thing I have in my life is my character and who I am as a human being. And so I tell myself, it is possible to live such a life because other human beings have. And it is possible to live a meaningful life. So I find that both. So, for example, when you're working with anger, Donald, in one of his chapters, he has, the 10 gifts of Apollo. You have strategies, and I wrote them down, and it's on my desk. So I find, like, so sometimes Marcus, of course, Stoicism focuses on compassion, fellowship, all those things. And Buddhism will give us a lot of practices to cultivate compassion. So Marcus says, he focuses on, you see what a vulnerable yet very strong person he is, but he focuses on compassion and benefiting others. But where, for me, the practices of, Buddhism, where you have like the metta meditations and many, many practices that you can actually cultivate the compassion. So I find that different, and then, Epictetus talks about Stoic mindfulness. And of course, the Buddha gives us so many ways of sitting practice and walking practice, and the way we wash dishes, the way we clean the toilet, the way we eat our food. So there's so many practices on mindfulness. Together, these two philosophies sort of give me a path and sort of help me to, just live my life more meaningfully. And then just work with the challenges. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen, the Vietnamese monk who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King, and he passed on two years ago, I think. He said that in the stormy ocean of samsara, which is your life, be your own refuge. And I think be your own refuge, not that, that is, so how do we, Marcus talks about building that inner citadel. And in my Dalai Lama calendar this morning, I was reading where the Dalai Lama says that, it's our anger, our jealousy, our greed. Those are the real enemies. The real enemies are outside ourselves, not outside ourselves, but inside. So how do we, so ethics, secular ethics, not Buddhist ethics, you can secular ethics. That secular ethics, the Dalai Lama says secular ethics. He emphasizes that warm-heartedness and compassion. These things are necessary so that we can work with that within ourselves, the real enemies within ourselves. So it all comes back to you. There's no one I wish there was someone to just save me, change my mind, transform my mind, take away all the difficult emotions and give me complete clarity. But it's just this daily practice in both traditions, this daily, absolutely daily practice, and this sort of slow, incremental progress that we make. It would be nice to take a pill and, wake up enlightened, but no, we work with our own minds, right?
And that's what a lot of people are looking for, like that quick fix, right? They want to read something, a sentence, a quote or whatever, and then, expect their life to be changed. But it takes a lifetime, right? And then even maybe that's not even long enough. And it's interesting that you mentioned, your quote from the Dalai Lama, because we have like our daily quotes on like our socials. And today it was one from Seneca. I said, like, greed is satisfied by nothing, but nature finds satisfaction even in scant measures. So like, if we really truly go to our nature, we can be satisfied with even the smallest of just being alive, just in this moment, right? So
yes. Yes. And I mean, the Buddha says, sort of give up your desires, and what doesn't mean, and at the same time that the miracle is there in life, in walking on earth with mindfulness, appreciating the plate of food before you. But it's, when I look at my own life, even if I just look at the last week, the things that sort of make me unhappy or the things that cause me difficult emotions is always this desire, like of, like Dog Chen, the Zen teacher, he says, forget, to know the self is to forget the self. It's like this, it's this endless craving, like that our society,
yeah,
sort of encourages. We compare ourselves to others. We want things.
Even encourages, right?
Yeah.
They're pushing it on us with with everything. And kind of to build on that, because I really enjoyed, like, talking about the two philosophies. And here we're talking about Stoicism, but we're also really advocates of people creating their own philosophy of life. And I'm just curious, with you've studied about all these philosophies. How would you, maybe it's an impossible question, but how would you describe your philosophy of life? And is that something how has that evolved?
Yeah, I think like one of the precepts that Thich Nhat Hanh says in his 5 mindfulness precepts taken from Buddhism, he says, don't be dogmatic about your views, don't have a fixed mind. And I just see that my own views keep changing. The views that I held as a teenager, the views that I held in my 20s, my own opinion keeps changing. And so even as I practice mindfulness, even as I practice Stoicism, I try not to be rigid. I try not to be dogmatic, because that causes wars and divisions between people. But really to just think, this is what works. This is what I understand right now. And this is what works for me right now. And to also be respectful of someone who has completely different views from mine, different goals. I think I think in terms of philosophy, it's also what we need at that moment, what speaks to us at that particular moment. For me, I would say so much of my philosophy is from Buddhism and from Stoicism. But that doesn't mean I haven't been helped by teachings in the Bhagavad Gita and Rumi's poetry and all these things. I mean, we are all climbing that same mountain, as Amma, the hugging saint, says, but we take different paths. And as soon as I start defending Stoicism or defending mindfulness and feeling I'm superior in any way, I've sort of slipped into spiritual materialism and dogmatism and being too opinionated and not humble, just blocking my capacity to learn. So I think my philosophy is just not to waste my life, to try to be to cultivate compassion and wisdom, and to try to do meaningful work, to try to live with awareness. And that's to be the kind of person I want to be. That's it. And then I just draw from others. And then I journal. I journal a lot. I journal every morning. As Seneca says, don't go to bed at night until you've asked yourself these 3 questions. The golden verses of Pythagoras, where you ask yourself 3 questions, what did I do today? What did I accomplish? What could I have done better? What did I leave out? And, Seneca says, don't go to bed at night until you've sort of reflected on your day. So I journal in the morning. And so for me, writing is a form of self-contemplation. It's a form of self-inquiry. It's also a way of releasing my emotions and understanding.
Nice. That's I should do more of the journaling. I used to a few months ago. I stopped, but I used to write like little poetry things in the mornings and in the evenings, kind of as a reflection. I posted them on the socials because then it just structures my mind a little bit. But I love that idea, and there's so many different techniques. And just before we delve into that, I wanted to hear from you as well, because you know a lot about Buddhism and Stoicism. Could you answer maybe in a few sentences, what is Buddhism and what is Stoicism?
So for me, Buddhism is it's a philosophy, and it's a way of awakening my own Tara nature, my own Guanyin nature, my own Buddha nature, and mastering my emotions, because often, it's my own emotions. It's my own patterns that create suffering. As, Thich Nhat Hanh says, that we say we want happiness, but we are habituated to unhappiness. And so through our responses to things, through our endless, desires, and we create suffering for ourselves. And so I think for me, that is what Buddhism is. And that is what Stoicism is, like, just to soak myself in wisdom, those who have come before me, and to leave a good footprint on the earth, when I leave, however small it is, but to not create harm.
No, that's great. That's a good way to define it. I'm also curious as to how these philosophies show up practically in your life. So could you kind of walk us through what your daily routine is in regards to these sort of things?
Yeah. So I actually, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is just this reminder of my aspirations, which I say aloud or say in my mind before my little sort of altar that has both Buddhist and Stoic symbols. I have a little Marcus Aurelius something, and whatever stone, whatever has meaning for me. So I recite something from which is the central crux of Mahayana Buddhism, which is, may I act with pure motivation, and there's this idea of being of benefit to oneself and to others. And Thich Nhat Hanh has this wonderful gatha or short verse, which is, waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live it in mindfulness and to look at all beings with eyes of compassion. So all beings without exception. And so that's an aspiration. And then I also remind myself from things from Stoicism, Cleanthis's prayer, whatever it is. So for me, they say that if you don't remind yourself before the day begins, and you have some good days, some days when nothing happens, and some days where crazy things happen, and the day will ride you. So it's a way of just sort of meeting the day, recognizing the gift of the day, and recognizing the gift of those precious hours. I also in the morning very quickly will remind myself about something I'm working on. So once when I was going through a period where I was really angry, it was vow not to speak with anger, but to wait till I had reached a place of equanimity to speak more skillfully. So now I'm focusing on more loving, kind speech and listening. I'm not such a good listener, non-judgmental, compassionate listening. Because sometimes I give advice when people are not asking for advice. They just want to listen. I'm spouting Stoicism or Buddhism and telling them, and all they want is to listen. So Thich Nhat Hanh says, listen in such a way that you help the person transform their suffering. So just the act of listening. In Buddhism, there is the figure of the female Buddha, Kuan Yin, and she is the bodhisattva of listening. So just to listen to others compassionately, to listen to others the way you want to be listened to listen to others with the attempt to try to understand them instead of judging them. So, that sort of compassionate kind of non-judgmental listening, which is very difficult because we're always judging. I like this, I don't like this, or, there's this constant, but to give that, I think, so in a way that's presence. So I begin the morning. It's very quick with these, waking up this morning. And sometimes it's a good morning. I'm happy. Sometimes I haven't slept. I'm in a bad mood, but I still say the aspiration and I still try. And then even simple actions like Thich Nhat Hanh has when you're brushing your teeth. He has a gatha for that, which is 4 sentences that you will try to have good speech, pure speech, kind speech, compassionate speech. So with these gathas, that present moment, wonderful moment, he has a beautiful book with gathas. It's our everyday actions. And so it's it's a straining of the mind. I also spend some time after that in journaling and in writing. And then the rest of the day. And at the end of the day, I try to scan my day very quickly. So that's what my day is like. But I try, I very often, and then through the day, as Lama Surya Das says, have breath breaks. Like check in, pull yourself back if you're really going off, which happens constantly, right? Like
Yeah, and I remember about the listening. Zina also mentioned something like we have one mouth and 2 ears. We should listen more and speak less. That's also a difficult one for me, so it's a good reminder. And active listening is so difficult. And another quote that I read that in a book, the Socrates Express, I think it was, about Simone Weil, who said, "Attention is love." And that's something that if we want to practice compassion and kindness, to pay attention to someone, like really attention, not because we often say like, "Oh, I'll give you my time," right? But in the book, he mentions like, "Oh, but time without attention is an insult," right? Everybody can give you their time, but if you can't give you the attention or to listen, that's the crux of the matter, right? And with these practices, and you mentioned things like when you have moments where you feel a little bit more angry or when you're working on these things, how do you feel like the application, right, the practical application of these philosophies and of your philosophy of life, how do you feel that that helped you grow as a person?
Yeah, so I mean, my first, my proto passion, as the Stoics would say, my first instinct may be anger when I'm really, someone has said something really rude or whatever it is, or I'm just triggered by my own stuff and I may react immediately. Yeah. So my first reaction may be to be angry, to be off, whatever. But I found that with practice, with actually practice, that I'm able to at some point, reel myself back in and come back to come back to, some sort of calm and more mindful speech. But initially, I do flip, and I can flip at times. But it's just that going back to myself is faster. So without the philosophy, I think I would just escalate. I wouldn't know what to do with it. But as Stoicism, as we remember, once the anger builds momentum, it's even harder to pull back. So the philosophy gives you, I think what philosophy does is that it gives you, as the teacher, the Buddhist teacher Pema Chandran says, it is good medicine. So we have the teachings. So if I am really sad about something that is happening, life brings us so many challenges. The first truth of existence is life has suffering. So if I'm really sad, or if I have, whatever I'm feeling, I just let it stay in the room. I don't fight it. I just let it stay in the room. It's the practice that's important. So sometimes when I sit at my writing desk or I'm meditating, it's not a good practice. My sentences are all over the place. It's not a good writing session. I don't feel motivated. I feel discouraged. And then other times I feel good. We don't stop taking our feelings so seriously. We just say it's like the clouds. Like in Buddhism, you say it's like the clouds passing. The Thich Nhat Hanh says, suffering is impermanent, happiness is also impermanent. It's the central truth of Buddhism, impermanence. So when it's a difficult situation, I tell myself the suffering is impermanent. And it's also, I reframe it like, how can I suffer intelligently? If it's an external and it's come to me, how can I, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, make compost from which fruits and vegetables can grow instead of it being garbage? How can I use this difficult situation as fuel for my own, the obstacle is the path, right? How can I use it as fuel for my own practice? So if I didn't have a person who acted if I didn't have that directed at me, or if I didn't have a difficult situation, I wouldn't have the opportunity to practice these virtues and to strengthen my own muscles. So that's what I feel, that all these adverse situations over which the externals, over which we have no control, if we reframe it as an opportunity, which is what we find in Stoicism and Buddhism, as a way of actually strengthening those muscles. So I'm strengthening my muscles for endurance. I have an opportunity to practice. I mean, we all like easier times. And when we get an easier time, we are very appreciative.
I love that phrase you said, suffering intelligently. That's going to live in my brain for a while, because I like that. I like that idea, and how to turn it into compost. Very much like in line with sort of the idea of amor fati and loving your fate. And not only that, but how is this going to improve me and make me better? So I really like that concept. One thing I want to ask is, obviously most of our listeners on here are going to be familiar with Stoicism, but not so much Buddhism and mindfulness. So what would be kind of, I guess, your pitch in a sense, if I'm someone that enjoys Stoicism, I'm a person that I enjoy the resilience and kind of path that it gives me, but I'm a little bit maybe intimidated by meditation and mindfulness. What would be your pitch to me as to why I need this, and then also where should I start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, maybe you need it and maybe you don't. And, as the Dalai Lama says, he says, if there's something in Buddhism, I remember him giving a talk at the Rogers Center in Toronto, and he said, if it appeals to you, you don't have to be a Buddhist, just like you don't have to be a Chinese to eat Chinese food. So you can take what appeals to you. And at the same time, he also says, if there was just one restaurant in the world, it would be very boring. So we all want different things. So the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh or the teachings of the Buddha is not something that will appeal to everyone, and it's not necessary that it does. But if it is something that one is interested in, but I think all of us have to find a way, as the Dalai Lama says, being religious is not important, being spiritual is not important, but cultivating warm-heartedness and compassion is the most important thing. And then if we look at that the real enemies are not really outside ourselves, but our own, own greed and jealousy and anger, how do we work with this? And so if the teachings of, say, Buddhism offers us one possible way, and I would recommend Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen Buddhist monk, Dalai Lama, their books. So Thich Nhat Hanh has a beautiful book, Present Moment, Wonderful Moment. Dalai Lama has The Art of Happiness. So, and YouTube now, we have so many talks, so many meditations, teachings, wisdom at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And also distraction at our fingertips. I was reading the news and I thought, why am I doing this? So much of it. I mean, we have to be aware, but to just sort of spiral down into just a feeling of overwhelm and suffering that you can do nothing about. So we have to, we have to just be wise. So I think if it draws you, yeah, I would recommend, just as in Stoicism, I highly recommend Donald Robertson's How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. I would recommend Thich Nhat Hanh as a starting point.
Yeah,
Wow, that's great.
Any of his books.
I need to start reading those a little bit more. I don't know,
I do
have
have
you
a
read
couple
any of them,
his,
Brendan?
of his books. I can't remember which one. Taming the Tiger, The Miracle of Mindfulness. So I've read, so I've read those two,
Miracle of Mind.
but nothing else though. That's kind of where I stopped.
Next time when I
Yeah,
come and
I'm waiting
visit,
for you.
I'll pick them up.
And in terms of meditation, again, it's like James Clear in Atomic Habits. He talks about 1%. We don't think, oh, I have to sit and meditate for 20 minutes. No, just sit for a few minutes, sit for 5 minutes, and everyone can do 5 minutes. So for me, my meditation this morning was brief. And then, before the talk, I was sitting here, the windows open, just listening to the birds and just trying to, so these moments, the miracle, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, the miracle is being alive. And he said the miracle is not walking on water. The miracle is walking on earth with mindfulness. And we are so caught with our own, in our own mind, even with our own goals, however worthy they are. But but we're so caught with our own projects and life, while the miracle of, the sun rising, just the birds, just being alive, the cup of tea in your hand. We just miss the miracle of life, And so have time to be, Thich Nhat Hanh says it's a hurry sickness. We're always running. And I myself have to tell myself, because I find myself running, but just have time to just be. And so I think for me, the most dramatic thing with all these philosophies has been this fact that happiness is possible. Like, just like suffering well is an art, there is an art to happiness, that happiness is possible and that I can access it. And the miracle is in this moment. And I don't want to miss the miracle, my appointment with life, as he has a book. I don't want to miss the miracle of being alive. Seneca says each day is a life. So the fact that if I train my mind and if I learn daily, I am able to also access greater happiness. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, live fresh, solid, and free. Like more lightness with a greater sense of freedom. So even in the Buddhist tradition, in the Mahayana tradition, even as you dedicate yourself for the welfare of others, it is also making you happier, because otherwise we are obsessed by me. What will make me happy? Will I get this? Or we are caught in jealousy. Someone got that wonderful book contract and my writing is better. Envy or inferiority. Why is she able to write so much faster than me? Why is mine so slow? So as Thich Nhat Hanh says, we are constantly moving from these feelings of inferiority, superiority, but it's as foolish as the big wave telling the little wave, I'm better than you, or the little wave looking at the big wave and thinking, I'm less than you, because we're all water. So that's why the self, in Buddhism, this cherishing of the self, everything in Buddhism is a paradox, right? Everything is a paradox. So this idea, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, when you pass on, your actions are your only belongings. So even as there is so much of focus on every day of your precious human life, making good use of your life, having an intention, channeling your energies towards that intention, at the same time, self-cherishing is a source of great suffering. And I know that when I slip into suffering, there's some externals that come from outside you, but there's so many things that are self-created, and we suffer. So when I'm suffering at the writing desk, it's because something was turned down, something was not picked up, something was not published, someone else won a prize, that someone else got a great publishing contract. So it's it's a self-cherishing, because we see ourselves as different from others. We see ourselves as separate. So in Buddhism, it's this idea of non-self. So when are we going to drop it? And that goes back to what the Buddha says, drop your desires. So it's very hard because samsara, the world is very sticky. It's like honey. It has wonderful, delicious things that we see on Facebook, we see on media that we want. But we lose what is the most, all of us, including myself. I keep falling off, and then I have to bring myself back. Like, what is of true value? What is the writing I want to do? How do I want to spend my time? I could write many kinds of books. What is the book I want to write? What is meaningful to me? So these are questions we, because time is so finite, right? Our lives are so
Yeah, and I hear a lot of comparisons there. We talk about comparison between Buddhism and Stoicism. Drop your desires. It's what Epictetus talks. Oh, you open one of his discourses, and he's probably going to mention, "Don't covet your desires," or don't run to your aversions, or stay away from them. And I also wanted to hear a little bit more about where does the path separate? What are the differences between Buddhism and Stoicism? Where would, for example, why would a person, for example, relate more to Buddhism and the Stoicism? Where do you see that difference?
So, like even in Buddhism, there are many different kinds of Buddhism. Like there's Tibetan Buddhism, there's Zen, Chan. There's so many kinds of Buddhism. So where does it separate? Yeah, I'm sure that scholars who write theoretically, I'm sure there are points of differences, maybe. But for me, actually, the way I practice it, it's like even the Marcus Aurelius says, God or atoms, who knows? And in Buddhism, there's this emphasis that there may be other lives, that your karma and all that. But at the same point, I don't know, I actually don't. I think so in Buddhism, you can have Buddhism with a lot of ritual, like Tibetan Buddhism has more ritual, more, visualization of deities, even though they are all empty. The deity is as empty as a rainbow, but you sort of visualize them. But I don't. So there are differences, but I can't say I really investigate the differences. For me, it's more just, it's just very practical. It's just whatever helps me live. And I find that both philosophies help me live.
And is it because sometimes when I explain Stoicism to people who don't know, it's kind of like I tell them it's the Western version of Buddhism, more rational and pragmatic. And if you were to say, like, because in Stoicism it's all about using your reason and logic, is that something that is implied as well in Buddhism?
Absolutely. It's all about the mind. It's all, eventually it's all about working with your mind. Buddhism is completely, you don't, in fact, Thich Nhat Hanh says, you don't really need these statues of the Buddha or anything, We do it because we feel comforted by it. I have, a little image of Marcus. And I don't know if you can see that. I have Marcus with sunglasses behind. I got that, and I went to Trier where they have this wonderful Marcus Aurelius, the exhibition. It's still on, and so I got that bag. So for me, these visuals. Some people don't like visualization, but for me, these visualizations are just ways of reminding myself of my values. As I go through my day. So, but Buddhism values the mind. It's all about awakening your own Buddha nature. It's not really, and often there's a misunderstanding of Buddhism because you see people bowing and reciting mantras and chanting, and you think it's all ritual. But you're doing it more for yourself. You're doing it to really sort of awaken that Buddha within you. So whether you have that statue or not, it doesn't matter. We all need different things, but Buddhism is basically that. There's no point prostrating before the Buddha and lighting incense if you can't awaken that.
To me, it seems like, as we've gone through this conversation, it's just they both offer different methods to know yourself a little better. All about understanding yourself, your natural state of being,
Yes.
how to act in the world. And they both give you tools and things that help you, as you say, kind of get back up after you've fallen down or slipped off. You can get back up, and it's just. And I also like the consistency seems to be something that overlaps as well. Recognizing and understanding that this is an ongoing practice that happens daily, and it's not something that happens in a weekend retreat or after reading a few books. It's a lifelong journey. of improvement.
Yes, yeah. So I think for some people it can work in, at least for me, it works, in a very complementary way. So I do compassion practices. The Marcus talks of, Stoicism has a lot of emphasis on compassion, but in Buddhism, there's a lot of practices. Stoicism talks about Stoic mindfulness. Buddhism, a lot of sitting, a lot of mindfulness practices, 8 ways to do this, 4 ways to, there's so many, even using a mala, you're whatever it is, the repetition is to make your mind just settle, because it's always chattering, and it's always in a, it's, you're making your mind your friend. You're making it your ally.
Oh,
You're
wow.
making it your friend. The mind can
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
source of great suffering, and it can create so much of suffering in the world. So never, both in Buddhism and Stoicism, never underestimate your capacity as a human being. As Sri Ravi Shankar from the Hindu tradition, I remember him once saying that even a fly that comes into the room has a capacity to irritate you. So never underestimate the impact that you make in the world. It doesn't have to be on a big scale.
Yeah, I remember, even mosquitoes, they can keep me up all night if they
Yeah.
even the smallest ones. It's a great example. And talking about that, the impact, and you talked about having a meaningful life and also the meaningful job, or what we do. What would you say to people who struggle with finding that meaning, and how to find that more? Because a lot of people ask us, like, what is my purpose? How do I find a purpose, the meaning in life and the meaning in my job? And what would you say to those people who are looking for that meaning and what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I was at the Buddhist temple yesterday. I was visiting, there was an art exhibition, and there was this beautiful photographer, and he had done such beautiful work. And I thought, oh my gosh, what meaningful work. Like, he's added to the collective unconsciousness of love and hope, instead of fear and anger, and so this morning in my journal, I was again, and as I was looking through my own writing, is like, what is my art? Because art is very powerful. Our words are very powerful, both spoken and written. Is it adding to the collective unconsciousness of suffering and fear, or is it adding to the collective unconsciousness of love and hope and those things? So I have to constantly look at that, so I have to remind myself that, as this famous Egyptian writer Nawal al-Saadawi said, I won't sell my pen to anyone. And she has passed on, but she was an Egyptian writer. She was in prison. She was exiled. Her books were banned. She received death threats. Her thing was that she wouldn't sell her pen to anyone. So as a writer, I could be a writer who would write what exactly is popular at that time, what I know will sell. But is that what I want to do? So we come back in whatever work we do, we come back to what is the meaning? Like, what is the why are we doing this? Is this how we want to spend our life? So in terms of purpose, I think, even everything you do, Thich Nhat Hanh would say, has purpose. So if you're washing the dishes, you wash it as if it's a baby Buddha, because if you're rushing through washing the dishes so that you want you to have your cup of tea, then you're not living in that moment, or when you're washing dishes. So, so whatever, I think using your talents, as Jeff Traylor in the Epictetus's book club, where he takes, which is set in an Ohio penitentiary, and where the inmates, many of them on death row, are reading Epictetus. It's a sense that whatever our talent is, using our recognizing our talent, and then using that talent to benefit ourselves and others. So some of the work I do is not exciting. It may not be exciting, but I try to do to the best of my ability. As Marcus says, as a Roman and as a man, so as a Indian Canadian woman, how do I do my work well, whatever that work is? So some of that work may not be exciting, but some of that work, but whatever it is, how do I do it well? And so I think purpose is nothing, it's nothing grand. It's just, if you are someone someone I know has this ability to make beautiful cakes. And so she makes those cakes and people enjoy her cake. So it's not, it's not even I think it's just using what you feel a natural talent towards, and using it to benefit others and yourself, and trying to do it with 100% effort. I'm sure you and I have come across people who do their jobs so badly, They don't care. I've had teachers who don't care. But the fact is that just trying to give it your full presence. So as a teacher, there's some days maybe something's happened during the day and I'm very tired or I'm very upset or I'm very whatever. But when I sit in front of the students, I try to just do my 100%. Not to win praise. I mean, we all want praise, but we're trying not to focus on that, but to just realize that these human beings are in front of me and I have to give my best effort and try to be of benefit to them. So this constant focus of going beyond ourselves and trying to do our work well, as Marcus Aurelius says, be a Roman and a man, without secondary considerations of fame or anything else, but just to do our work well to the best of our ability. Maybe we'll get praise, maybe we'll get blame, but just to try to do our work well. And I think so. I think that's purpose, trying to live according to your true self. Thich Nhat Hanh, in his journal, Fragrant Palm Leaves, he lived through the Vietnam War. He saw terrible things. He was, for his dedication to peace, he was exiled from Vietnam for 44 years. And his books were banned. His name was erased from temples. So it was not an easy life, living through war, living through all these things. In Fragrant Palm Leaves, the very young Thich Nhat Hanh talks about your true self. So through your journal, through your meditation, through your sitting practice, walking practice, through your journal, asking yourself, what is my true self? Because he says very often we live prisoners to society. And so we struggle with this every day, because I struggle with it as I write, and someone gives me a suggestion, oh, if you do this, it'll sell. But you have to ask yourself, is this my true self? Is this what I want to do? Because, so I think that kind of, just asking ourselves, what is my true self? We don't understand ourselves fully, but in our journals, trying to understand who we are and what we really, really want to do in this world. However small, I'm a very tiny pebble. What do we really want to do in this world? So we use our very finite time because we can do 100 million things, but where our life is limited. So we make these choices. So they may be like, I have 5, 7 really fantastic book ideas and I want to do every one of them, but my life is limited. So which are the 1 or 2 books that I really want to write? So it's this kind of, and why? Why do I want to do it? What is my motivation? If it's just to, and for a writer who just wants to sell and hit the thing, that's fine. It works for them. Don't judge them. But what do you want to do for yourself? So these are questions, and I think that's meaningful work. So we can take out the garbage in a meaningful way. We make the environment better for someone else. So all work is equal. So I think that's, purpose is just being present and trying to live a good life and trying to be present. And I think trying to be, through your journal, aligned and awake to your life so that when an opportunity arrives, you are aware of it and you use it instead of just letting it go by,
I like that idea, what you just said about the journal keeping you awake.
Yes.
This constant practice of checking back in allows you to kind of not close your eyes to something.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Otherwise, we can sleepwalk through our entire lives. That's what they say. You can sleepwalk through your life, right? You can be chasing what everyone else chases just out of habit because that's what everyone else is doing. But to actually step out of that stream and contemplate yourself. Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way, she says, the snowflake pattern of your soul emerges in your journal. So you actually see, like, what is it that I want to do?
Interesting. I really appreciate this whole conversation. It's definitely opened my mind to a lot of different things. So I really appreciate your time. Also, we want to make sure that we point people in the right direction to where if they want to find you or they want to, read your books and things like that,
sure.
we want to make sure that we include that stuff as well.
Yeah. So, so I teach in the creative writing program and in the Arts and Humanities program at the School of Continuing Studies at the University of Toronto. So I have a class that is coming up in the fall, which is called Dear Diary. It's Marcus Aurelius and Thich Nhat Hanh. And so we read Thich Nhat Hanh's Fragrant Palm Leaves that I talked about, written in the 1960s when he was a young man. And we also read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. And we are also reading Antonio Macau's More Than Happiness. So that particular class focuses on the philosophies of Buddhism and Stoicism. And that's in the fall. And then In March, April, I do Stoicism and the Good Life. And then in June, July, Buddhism and the Good Life. And then I have writing classes like meditation and writing. Yeah, if they want to find me, I do have a website. It's not that well maintained, but it's there, and I will get an email if it's sent to me there. But also on the University of Toronto, the classes are open to and so we have students from South Korea, India, US, a lot of students from the US, because the Canadian dollar is lower than the Americans. We get a lot of people signing up for classes, and Europe, different time zones. So it's open to anyone. The creative writing program has the option of a certificate, but you don't have to be working towards it. And the arts and humanities, it's just out of interest. People come and take the classes. And then we have great guest speakers. We have Donald Robertson, who has come, John Sellers, and Ward Farnsworth, Rob Coulter, Eric Weiner. We've had great guest speakers in the classes.
Nice. That's amazing. I love to follow it. I'm going to look into that as well. See in the fall and see if and that's all online, right?
That's all online. I can show you can I get up for a moment? I can show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm working on, I think an excerpt from my novel is on modern Stoicism. Writers are very sneaky. We bring in the things that we are interested in. And I think the central premise of my novel, even with all the struggles, is, how do you live a good life? And so my main character falls in love with this person who is into Marcus Aurelius and into Stoicism. He's a philosophy major. And she's a literature major, so I'm able through him to bring in the philosophy of Stoicism. So there's an excerpt of a conversation they have, which is on the Modern Stoicism blog, Stoicism Today. It's called Marcus Aurelius at the Lebanese Cafe. So if people are interested, they can read that. So, but this is the book I published in Dubai that we talked about. It's called Through My Mother's Window. It's available in the US. It was published in Dubai, so I haven't yet put it on Amazon, but it's available through Tara Mandala bookstore in the US and in Canada. So anyway, that's the book.
And in Dubai as well. So next time I'll go there, I'll pick it up.
Yes.
Cool.
That sounds great.
Well, it's been so good to talk with both of you, Benny and Brendan.
It's been great having you on, and thanks for taking us on this journey through the philosophical world of Buddhism, Stoicism, and everything else around it. And we really appreciate it for having you on.
And I appreciate your podcast and all the good work that y'all are doing.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Good luck with that.
Thank you very much. And maybe till next time, when your new book comes out and we can see how that works with Marcus Aurelius, then we can talk about that as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. George. We appreciate it. And thank you to the listeners for coming by and being with us for an hour or so while we have this wonderful conversation. But if you could like and subscribe to the podcast, we really appreciate that. And any comments that you have about this conversation, please leave a comment on YouTube or whatever platform that you are looking to, and we'll be sure to respond to you.
Thank you for listening to the Via Stoica Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Your feedback will help us reach more like-minded people on the journey to self-improvement. If you want to get in touch with us or find more information, you can go to viastoica.com, your one-stop platform for all things Stoicism and living better. And remember, virtue is the only good.